So today we're starting InDesign. In general, you should have no problem moving over from Illustrator to InDesign, but I wanted to do a quick thing to show you the differences. In general, I always say that you should use InDesign if you have more than one page or if you have a lot of text. Now, there are a lot of designers who use InDesign for things that I personally think you should use Illustrator for. In general, if you're making something complex with vectors, Illustrator is going to do better. If you're making something with complex type, then InDesign is going to be better. So, first off, let's talk about the workspaces and kind of what it looks like. Now, in general, I always try to choose one of the workspaces that are presets that are going to have the most tools that you need for whatever you're working on. For Illustrator, I always chose Essentials Classic, and I'm going to choose that one again, but it's missing some of the things that I think you need, so we're going to add some things to it. So we have the same thing over here we do with Illustrator. These are the main panels we're going to use. You can collapse them or make them bigger. You can actually make them really small if you want, just so the icons are there. I'm going to leave it like that for you guys. And of course, you can open it up if that helps you. And you can also just click on them and they will open up each one kind of like that. So I am in the Essentials Classic workspace and I want to add a few things to that. We're going to go to Window and we're going to add Properties. So there is our Properties panel. We're going to go down to Type and Tools. We're going to add Character. And mine, it's just throwing it out here. So we're going to pick it up and drop it right here. I also want to add in Type, I want to add Paragraph. And once again, I'm going to drop that right there. That should be good to get us to start and for the first assignment. So this is what it looks like. Now, one of the main things you have to realize is when you place something in Illustrator, it's going to place it in kind of a box, in a frame. So for instance, if you look over here in the tools, you'll see this one is a rectangular frame tool. This one is a rectangle tool. So if you just wanted to make a basic rectangle, and you can see it's defaulted, it's filled with nothing, and it has a black stroke. So let's go ahead and put a color in there. Okay, so this is a rectangle. So let me just deselect that by clicking anywhere out here. Now I'm going to put it back on the default right here, and I'm going to grab the frame tool. The frame tool is just an empty frame, because realize that InDesign is good for laying things out. Let's say I like to use the yearbook as an example. So let's say we've designed a yearbook for our high school or our college, and they haven't taken the pictures this year yet, but we have to go ahead and get this ready to go. We can set this up with a bunch of these boxes, knowing that so we can have 6 senior pictures here, and we're ready. We can lay out everything that we need, and then when the pictures are there, we can just drop them in. And if we wanted to use this every year, we could do that too. So that's kind of the idea behind a frame. So I'm going to go back to my original for a second. So I'm going to make sure I have nothing selected, and I'm going to say File Place just to show you what happens here. So if I say File Place, I'm going to go get this picture of me, and if I just click once, it's going to put it in there. What it has actually done is it put my picture in there, a JPEG of me, but it also put a little frame around the outside. Now, these two selection tools, one of them is going to select the frame. The direct selection tool is going to select what is inside the frame. So if I select what's inside the frame, you can see that there's a picture of me that is inside this frame. So I could move it all around and it be inside that frame. I could actually make it bigger, and it's still not going to change the layout of what I've got going on there. So another way you can deal with it is if you're in the regular selection tool, if you click once, it's going to get both the frame and what's inside the frame. If you double click, you see I have a little hand tool now? Now I'm dealing just with what is inside the frame. So let's put me in here again, but differently. This time I'm going to select this frame, and I'm going to say File Place. You can see it put me in there, and it did not disturb the layout of anything I have in here. So let's go to this and say we need to put a bunch of pictures in here. So I want to grab these down here, and I'm going to go get my 6 senior pictures that have been taken. I'm going to say File Place, and go get 6. 1. It's going to load them in here, and you can see there's a little 6 next to in the upper left. It's saying there's 6 of them loaded in there. So I'm just going to go and now drop them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so it looks pretty good, except for you can say these ones don't go all the way to the edge of the frame. Like when you look at this, this doesn't look right. This is something called fitting. So let's kind of look at what's happening here. So let's click on hers. I'm going to zoom in, and it's the same way as you would with Illustrator. Alt and scroll your mouse. You can see that her picture does not fill the frame, and that's looking kind of weird. So I'm going to click on this frame once and go to Properties. Down here we have something called Frame Fitting. So let's kind of look at the different examples here. This one calls Fill Frame Proportionally, so I'm going to click that one. That's what we wanted. I'm going to undo, Control Z. Fit Content Proportionally. Now that might not look different to you right now, but it still has a little edge. What it did is it didn't zoom in any. It did not zoom in any, so it just left it the size it was, and it still has kind of left a little edge. So that's not the one we want either. Let's look at the other ones. This one is Fit Content to the Frame. So take that content and make it fit the frame. It looks very similar to what we did before, but not exactly, and I think you'll understand that in a minute. And then this one just says center it. Okay, so let me do this again up here where we have a bigger frame, and I think it'll make more sense. So let's get this one, and I'm going to say place, and I'm going to place her picture in there. So obviously that's kind of not what we want. So let's go and try this fitting thing. If I say fill frame proportionally, it did it. Now that kind of looks okay. We could now double click and move her down, right? Because I'm double clicked and I've got the little hand tool and I can move her down. So we could do that. I'm going to undo all of that. Let's try this other one. Fit content proportionally. So it took the content, which was 4 by 5 inches, and it tried to fit it in this rectangular box. It did what we said. That is not what we want. Let's go to this one. It says fit frame to content. It just took that frame and it made it the size of the content. Okay, that one makes sense. Let's try this one that says fit content to frame. Now, because we didn't tell it to stay proportional, it made her look insane, didn't it? Absolutely. Now, there's a new one here that you can say, basically let the UI decide content aware fit, and it's just going to decide what it thinks is right, which, it's sometimes right. If we wanted to keep her this size and fill all this in, we would need to go into Photoshop and extend this and know that we need to make it that size. So I think for this one, this picture is just not going to work and look good there. So I'm actually going to go get a different picture. So I double clicked to get her, and let me delete that and show you another picture. I'm just showing you this so you understand what all of this stuff means when you get going with it. And I'm going to drop this in here. So let's try this one that says fit frame proportionally, right? We don't want it to stretch it. Let me see what happens if we stretch it. Yeah, that just looks weird. Don't do that. So let's use this first one, and then we can just double click and move it down so none of their heads are getting cut off. And I might need to zoom in just a tad. Okay, pretty good. So that in general is what that does. So let's talk about font. I want to try to make this yearbook here in the font up here. So on this version, we have not put the font up there yet. I'm just going to click my text tool. It's going to default to be Minion Pro 12 points, just like it did in Illustrator. But in Illustrator, you could just click and start typing. You cannot do that in here because remember, it has these frames that you have to fill. So Illustrator is one of the few places that you actually need to make a text box. In general, text boxes are more trouble than they're worth. But in InDesign, because we want to have this layout, we need to make sure we make a text box. So I'm going to go ahead and draw a text box across here. And now I'm going to type what I need to type. Okay, I'm going to double click that to select the whole thing. And then let's go over to our character panel. And it's got the same little filters that you can use like we did in Illustrator. I'm just going to choose one of these that's kind of bigger. Choose Gibson. And I'm going to go ahead and make it, say, 72. Now I can use paragraph to align it. I can also realize up here it's changing all of these things. A lot of these choices are up here, so we could say center it right there. But now let's look at this. I want it to be centered within the text box. So how can I center it within this box that I've made? So let's get back out of here and just select the box. And look up here, there's a lot of different choices for what you can do in the box. And it has, do you want it to align to the top of the box or the center of the box? This is the type of thing when I was first dealing with InDesign, I just could not figure out what was going on. So this is very confusing to students when you first start. Another thing that's confusing is, let's talk about color. Let's say we want to change the font to be a different color. So if we are clicked on this and we say we want this to be, say, blue, what it did was it put blue in the text box, not in the font. Okay, this is this right here. Do you see this little choice right here? So I'm going to go back and say none for the text box. You have to click right here to say, I want to change the color of the text. Now it is changing the color of the text box. So that confused me to death when I was trying to figure this system out by myself. Okay, another thing that kind of drove me crazy when I was teaching this to myself is sometimes you're looking at this and it just looks really bad. Like if you look at this, why does it look so bad? And that's just the way you're viewing it. If you go up to View, Overprint Preview, that's actually what it's going to look like. So I never could figure out when I was teaching myself, I was on the job, nobody else knew how to use this. They told me to use InDesign. I had to figure all this out. That was the problem. So you can leave it just in normal most of the time, but that's why it will kind of look bad. Another way that you can look at things is over here. They have, you can look at it with bleed. You can look at it in presentation mode, and that will kind of show you what it's going to look like better when it's printed. And then escape to get out of that. And the last thing I wanted to show you is one of the most powerful ways that you can do InDesign. So I'm going to go over here to Pages, and you can see, I just realized that I had spelled out textbook and I meant yearbook, so I fixed that. So over here in Pages, we are making a yearbook, so we need lots and lots of pages. So I'm just going to start adding some pages. So you can see we've got almost 10 pages of yearbook now. We can go back to that page just by double clicking on it. But let's say we want the top of them to all say yearbook on them. So this is where it becomes very powerful. I'm going to click on that text box and I'm going to just cut it. And now I'm going to go over here to Master Pages. And right here is our first parent page. I'm going to double click on that and I'm going to paste that yearbook word in here. Now I want you to look over here. It has added yearbook to every page that is on that side. And if we add more stuff, it's going to add that to every subsequent page that we make. So if I go and start looking at it, they all have that yearbook. So this is called Master Pages. Let's say we wanted to put page numbers at the bottom of them. You could go add it to the master page and it would add it to all of the pages. Say you had 200 pages, 300 pages. So this is one of the things that makes InDesign more powerful if you have multi-pages. Another thing that would be good is if I decide I need this girl to move down here, it's not on a separate document, it's all together. All right, so let's get started with our first projects in InDesign. That is just a basic overview.